Welcome to the Zachrilege Cast podcast, YouTube video, interview program that features me talking to some of the best and brightest in the atheist / secular / awesome community. This is episode number 121. Damn, I've been doing this a long time. I am recording live on December 1st, 2017. I would like to thank my guests from 2 weeks ago because I was on vacation last week. Deb, aka Heretic Woman, Michael Schaefer, Mike Bohler. Wonder what happened to that dude. Skeptic, Brett, Superhuman, not Superfan, Jeannie Eichard, and Sam Mulvey. It was fun, although maybe I like the concept. I wonder if I might need to have fewer people next time, just because so many people, so many things to talk about. And the three of you who displeased me, you will know by my passive-aggressive beer sipping. You may apologize to me privately and later. So tonight's guest, of course, the one member of the panel 2 weeks ago who I had never interviewed by himself. So we're going to do that tonight. So Mike Bohler started a skeptic conspiracy theory podcast way before reality stopped meaning anything. He's the host of A Skeptic's Guide to Conspiracy, and by the end of the hour, he's going to admit that they're all true. So welcome to the show. I don't know if you might be my second or third guest who's like smoking on air, but hey, it's your studio. You do what you want. How you doing?
Hello, everyone. Hello. Doing good. And yeah, I'm probably the last of the few smokers, so I'm going to enjoy it while I can.
Enjoy it while you can. Yeah. Just want to let everybody know. So the first beer I opened tonight, I had a Nashville beer trip recently, and I picked up from Blackstone, Black Bell. So this is like a bourbon barrel-aged stout, which has been my thing. It was from 2016. Also aged in cocoa nibs and aged in bourbon barrels. So kind of a dessert beer. So I popped it open before I was going to have dinner. And I'm like, yeah, this probably should have been dessert beer. I have to ask people because they had a very low carbonation. I'm kind of a fan of carbonation beer. And, you know, sometimes the bourbon barrel stuff loses that. And maybe it's because it's been around for a while. But that's what I have. And just in case that's not enough, I got a Boulevard, a whiskey barrel stout, and that sucker's carbonated as all get out. Just to let you know what I'm going to do to get us through tonight. So, Mike, I want to start the show by asking you about your show. Of course, you do A Skeptic's Guide to Conspiracy. When did you decide, because you've been doing this for a while, like when did this show start, and how did you think, oh, like, I should do a podcast because I think these conspiracies are interesting and I want to share what I know or what you know.
Yeah. Well, I started maybe about 4 years ago, though I'm not as regular lately as, well, I went into kind of a doldrum and then I'm kind of kicking it back up again. But it was about 4 years ago. And actually, that's when I first discovered podcasts. And like, well, see, I've wanted to do something. I mean, I was thinking, the stuff I've been studying, can I do a book? Can I do a video? What can I do to get this information out, get it to people? Because a lot of the stuff there's a lot of people who do believe in conspiracies. My Facebook was always filled with somebody who says something weird. I wanted to do something. And when I discovered podcasts like A Skeptic's Guide to Conspiracy, or A Skeptic's Guide to the
Someone
Universe.
stole your show idea? Oh, yeah. They're actually, I think they're based out of Atlanta because I've seen like a local show.
Yeah. The Skeptic's Guide to the Universe, Skeptoid. What were some of those first ones I've listened to?
Is Skeptoid the one where the guy does the really short episodes? Because I feel like that's the one I've listened to. Because the episodes are usually like 10 minutes.
Yeah, 10, 15 minute.
And he really gets to the point about one thing.
Yeah, Brian Dunning.
Yeah, him, yeah. Okay.
Let's see what other ones I was listening to. There was Carl Mamer's Conspiracy Skeptic. I'm trying to think all the other ones, but those were the big ones. And I'm like, this is a cool way of doing it. I've got the face for radio. And I don't know if my voice really that's the one thing that I've been trying to work on. I'm a very monotone type of when you if you listen to my show, it's gonna be really monotone, maybe a little too dry, not as peppy as like cognitive dissonance. You know, those guys. You know, I don't know how they do it. I mean, it's amazing. Those guys amaze me because they're just they're well they're smart, but then they can find humor in some of the stuff they report, and I'm not like that, and so trying to find to try to be a little bit more peppier, there's very little inflection in my voice, but since I'm talking to this is talking to you, I can uh, be a little bit more, but I wanted to get the stories out, and because I know that there are people. I mean, I read, if I read something in a newspaper or I see something in a magazine article, and I'm going, that ain't right. That's not right. Where are they getting this stuff? What's all that kind of thing. All those things. I'm like, maybe I got to do some. I got to do something because even at that time, I didn't realize people were hurting themselves. When they start believing this stuff. You know the skeptics guide, and they're always talking about somebody who's they're treating their cancer with homeopathy and then dying. It's like this has to stop. I mean, you know something's got to be done here because people are hurting themselves. So I got to do something, and I have to do something. And oddly enough, our orangutan in chief has bought into so much, and he's brought so much conspiracy into the government now. Something, that's really what that's why I kind of kicked things up. I was trying to get things going again, and it's just like, I got to do this. I got to sit down and start going through these stories and reporting and try to get this information out.
So, what was kind of the idea when you first recorded, and do you think you're still kind of doing a similar show now after all this time?
Well, I've been trying to stick to a format of, well, I was focusing in on a particular conspiracy. I've done a number of, the 9/11. I've done, I mean, my favorite, one I was quite familiar with was the Pearl Harbor conspiracies. So I've tried to stick to a a single conspiracy and kind of walk you through the facts, the history behind, or the history of those conspiracies, what's going on, and then just actually just leave it there. I mean, you know if you're on the wall, hopefully I've pushed you over to the good side, because I'm not going to convince a diehard. I mean, there's so many diehards out there that you can convince them while you're sitting there face to face, but then they're going to walk away, and then they're going to keep believing what they're believing. If I can pull somebody back from the dark side, I mean, that's my goal. I don't expect to change everybody in the world. I'm just hoping that keep enough people on the good side of of the of the conspiracy world, and maybe then through that force the conspiracy theorists back into the shadows, so to speak. So that's what I try to do, and I stick to a story, try to break it down, try to explain, no, this didn't happen, this couldn't happen, uh, go into those details. Then hopefully, that once you're done with it, at the end, and I might throw some comment, I try to separate my personal comments from the actual toward the end, and then hopefully you can walk away and say, he was right, and I was wrong. It's okay to admit to being wrong, and I'm hoping there's enough people like that I've flipped over. But but lately I'm in a kind of a mental block, and again, because of our current administration, government administration, a lot of, I think it's emboldened quite a few people who believe in conspiracies. So I'm seeing more and more stories coming out in, in my Google searches and my Google feeds, and it's like I gotta start doing something. And if it, so I'm actually doing a news taking news stories from the week and trying to break them down and tear them up a little bit. So I've started this deviation. It seems to work. There's people who like it, so I'm going to keep going with it. But then every so often, then do the big conspiracies. I'm working on a show on Wi-Fi, Wi-Fi, microwaves, electrical, magnetic fields, and stuff like that. My day job's I'm an electrical designer. I design these electrical systems. I'm wanting to do better than doing extra better, because um, I'm because I'm supposed to be able to. Okay, and if I make mistakes, it's going to be mistakes. Hopefully, it's not going to be electrical or mathematical. But anyhow, I'm digressing here a little bit. But I want to do a better show, so now I'm kind of in this mental block, trying to, how do I present this thing? So to keep the show going, keep content going out, I kind of been doing I've been going to the news format.
Well, there seems to be plenty of news. So you're still you're been a solo practitioner from the start, just you?
Pretty much. I've done only 2 interview shows. One with James Lambert. He did a documentary on on JFK and the assassination conspiracies. It's a really, when I watched it, he does this, he did this a really neat part where he actually interviewed people in Daily Plaza uh, who were he actually got people who are either into the conspiracy or believe in the conspiracy, and it's funny stuff. What's the name of that?
To actually have to like follow up what they believe with being at the location. Yeah, I definitely want to let people know. I'll send if you have James Lambert, I can look it up and find the documentary. I'll share it in the show notes.
Yeah, it was on Netflix.
Oh,
And I think you can
that's
get it
cool.
through Amazon. I think you can get it on Amazon also. And I interviewed him, then Dr. Stuart Robbins of the Exposing Pseudo Astronomy podcast, because we were talking about well, it was mainly on Pluto and the New Horizons mission, but I kind of let it go into talking science, because again, for my show, I tried to limit to my expertise and my interests. And even though I'm an engineer and work in engineering, I kind of like to leave the science to the scientists. And this was a perfect opportunity to bring a real scientist on the show and talk real science, because I mean, I don't want to misrepresent the work they're doing. And Stuart does his exposing pseudo astronomy, so he gets into he was getting he's what is the flat Earth. I think his last few shows was on flat Earth. And again, it's
Right.
excellent.
That's big now. That's popular.
That's very popular.
That's coming back. Well, I don't know if it's coming. Did it ever go away? Probably not.
It was always out there, but it's really making a big comeback. And I think it seems that because the celebrities are endorsing it, I think it's now making it popular. Was it Kyrie Irving? Bunch of football and basketball players have kind of endorsed the flat Earth ideas. So And so that's getting some traction. Of course, the chemtrail seems to be getting some traction too, but I don't know why. There doesn't seem to be anybody except I'm in this one group, and there's this they seem to love to pick on this crazy lady who thinks, well, the Wi-Fi towers are killing us. They're hitting us with being sprayed with chemicals, and I guess she's running for some office somewhere.
Mm.
So it's getting. I think there's some, but there seems to be a number of groups that have popped up in opposition. Well, it's possible, and I haven't really delved that deep into it, but I do come across things like there's a this geoengineering because of climate change. There are scientists who are uh, proposing ways of reducing uh, heat in the atmosphere. One of them is seeding the clouds with SO4. I think it's SO4, if I remember right. But it's like it's the constituent of volcanic eruptions, and the only problem is that by treaty, no, it's illegal to intentionally put CO4 into the atmosphere. Um, SO4, when it combines with hydrogen, makes H2SO4 of sulfuric acid, and then that rains down as acid rain. So that by treaty, um, there's a there's supposed to be reductions in the production of SO4, and I know this because I worked in the refineries, and that was one of their big environmental projects was to reduce SO4 from production or from being released into the atmosphere. So, um, but these I guess uneducated types who don't understand S you know SO4 and this type of stuff. I mean, because the scientists what they're proposing uh, is only speculative. If we do this, maybe if we do this, you know, our you know our best bet would be to reduce carbon output, reduce the carbon dioxide output, or whatever. All the fine, that type of stuff. But then there's of course think outside the box. Well, volcanoes block the heat or prevent heat from reaching the Earth's surface. Maybe that's a way to do it. That's where it's at now. It's not in this. They're not. They're not putting tanks on airliners and spraying it out the engines. So of course there's people who believe that, and they have to be stopped. They're the chemtrailers are probably, I'm going to say, maybe one of the I would put high on my list of total nutters.
Total nutters. That'd be a good check. So in this conspiracy, let's go from 0 to total nutter. That'd be a good one. So where are you based out of?
I'm southwest of Chicago, small town just west of Joliet, Illinois.
You've been there for a while. Are you from Chicago?
I've been living here all my life. I grew up in this house. I bought the house for my mother, and I've been living here ever since. So I do a lot of traveling for work. I've been all over the country. I've been I just got back from Michigan. I've been to California a few times, Oregon, Washington State, Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, New York, Indiana, Texas, Wisconsin. Yeah, that should cover most of where I've been for work. You know, various refineries and stuff like that. Been all over the place. So this but yeah, this is my but this is home base.
Okay, so what was your first show about? And I believe it was a local story.
The 1919 White Sox scandal, and I also covered the trial of Clay Shaw, one of the alleged perpetrators of the Kennedy assassination. And those two shows, I wanted to put a real conspiracy up against a conspiracy that was real versus a conspiracy that was fake. The 1919 White Sox scandal was a real conspiracy. Real conspiracies do happen, and I'm like trying to show that I'm open minded on this. That's why I put the that show on, because it's an interesting story. Where baseball players and gamblers and mafia types got together to throw the 1919 World Series. It's a story unto itself that's really cool. And then against a real conspiracy, the trial of Clay Shaw, where Jim Garrison had uh, he had convinced himself that there was this, the Warren Commission was wrong, that there was this magic bullet, so someone else had to have shot Kennedy, or there's something more to the story. So they ended up picking on Clay Shaw as a possible either conspirator or a shooter in the Kennedy assassination. Actually, drugged this guy into trial, and he ended up losing. Clay was acquitted; he was found not guilty. And so, to try to show that the one, here's this what conspiracies can do. These if these various conspiracies can ruin people's lives. Clay Shaw's life had never been the same after that trial. So that first show, I was trying to show again the two sides, to what a real conspiracy looked like versus what a make-believe made-up one looks like, and what happens or what can happen if a conspiracy gets believed too much, or and how it does damage people's lives.
That's true. And then the Oliver Stone movie really popularized the conspiracy side of it.
Yes. I mean, yeah, probably one of the biggest, I want to say hoaxes perpetuated on the American people was that movie. There was so much wrong in there and it was all based on it. And actually, I got the book here that was based on by Jim Mars, who's, there's a character. I think he passed away not too long ago, but he started off with talking about Kennedy assassination, the secret government that was supposedly involved with shooting the president. And then he started getting into this Illuminati, the reptiles running the world. Let's see what else. I think even trying to link that to Area 51 and aliens. He really went. He kind of went down a sad rabbit hole on that, and but he's actually almost like I'm going to say, I wouldn't call a founding father of conspiracies, but he's right in that area.
Definitely. Well, I want to take a short break. I haven't done this in a few weeks, but I feel like this is the week to do it. And Mike can have nothing to do with this and probably doesn't want anything to do with this. But this is a key week in the atheist movement, because on Monday, I think a lot of us got the message that came through Facebook. And basically, the story, if you're listening to this in the future, anywhere past, like 2018, this is the week that Scott Smith, who co-hosted the Recovering from Religion podcast, killed his wife, Jennifer Smith, in Texas. Basically killed her and then killed himself. And this kind of happened live on Facebook because he posted goodbye with the weird, the red kind of background. And all day, I think all of us were like, wait a second, this is really happening? Like, we didn't really think this was happening, but we're living in the era of this is really happening. Now, Mike can tell us later what is happening, what isn't. You know, he can definitely catch us between what isn't. But this is something that happened. I'm, of course, someone who was at a funeral today. I've been a couple of members of my wife's family who've passed away in the past few months. So there's been a connection to death. But if you really want to get into the weeds, check out this week's Thinking Atheist. I started listening to it before the show while I was like cooking dinner. And he actually talks to Scott's son and talks to some people who are involved. Emily, the co-host of the show, with Scott. And ultimately, I think we're looking for easy answers with this sort of thing. Like, we want to know, like, oh, it's PTSD, or, oh, this is the stress about a divorce. People are really hard to figure out. And this is just a very bad thing that happened. And we want to kind of deny that it happened because it actually looks bad on all of us. But it's just something that happens with people. And it's just a tragedy. And I'm glad that in a way that Thinking Atheist actually did this deep dive, because there is a GoFundMe to help support the 3 daughters of Jennifer and Scott. And that's really maybe what we should focus on. Like, hey, what can we do when something bad happens and you feel bad and you don't think you can do anything? Maybe you can help somebody if you have a few bucks to toss aside. And I will post that link in the show notes, and I will cease talking about that. But I think something that would be important to talk about on this show with Mike is, so how can you, as someone who's definitely studied this a lot, obviously if you're doing a show about it, this is like something you're really in on. How do you figure out, like, okay, this is actually a conspiracy, like the White Sox, World Series thing. This actually really is something that happened, it's real, versus so many of the things we hear these days that automatically it's lizard people, automatically it's these buzzwords that we hear. But maybe when it's hard to tell, how do you know when you're like, wait a second, this thing, there's nothing to this story?
Well, that's the tough part about it, because a really good conspiracy theory almost, on occasion, I've always said things like, this would, if this guy would have put this as a science fiction or as a work of fiction, this guy can make a fortune. These are great stories. Killing a president, it's a good thriller. You can that's what they turn these. Sometimes they turn these things into. But when they present it as things as fact, I mean, it does get tougher because, well, one, if you're late to the game, like a lot of people might be. I mean, if you're you're in high school right now listening to the show and you're just hearing, oh, there's a conspiracy about JFK. Let me look into that. Or that's an interesting story. You go in, a lot of the players aren't with us anymore. Certainly, of course, Kennedy, who would probably give you a lot of answers or might be able to give you some ideas. No, he didn't survive. The shooter, Lee Harvey Oswald, he gets killed getting into, being moved out of the jail.
I know, it's like, doesn't that add,
and
like, 2 parts that really add to the JFK thing? If there wasn't the videotape, who was the guy? The Zapruder tape. If that didn't exist, and then if like Lee Harvey Oswald lived, it wasn't like killed, it was like the next day, and it was on live TV. Like,
right.
Like, it really, I mean, I don't know, well, the killing happened live because people just heard about it, but the actual killing of Lee Harvey Oswald happened on TV, and they only did like 1 interview with him, and he went to the same hospital that Kennedy went to, and it's all that, yeah, that's,
yeah.
I don't know if there's like an aspect to that, and what the hell, we'll go into the whole JFK thing. Like, I mean, people just don't want to believe that the quote unquote great person like the president can be killed by
Right.
a nobody, but a nobody who actually had training in shooting. He was in, I think he was in the army, right?
Right.
I mean, he would
Army.
definitely know, but I mean, he wasn't like just some dude who just grabbed a gun and said, let me see what I can do with this.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's, like, and again, if, like I said, if you got, you're looking at this story, a lot of the evidence has kind of faded away. People who may have been there, uh, you know, well, was it Gerald Ford? He was on the Warren Commission. A lot of the Warren Commission uh, people are no longer with us. So asking the questions of these people, like you almost, because I find myself, man, if I could just talk to Gerald Ford and ask him, what were you thinking on this day, or when you signed off on the Warren Commission, that would be a neat question. I mean, I can go even further back. Admiral Kimmel in Pearl Harbor. I would love to be able to talk to that guy and say, well, what were you really thinking? That week leading up to Pearl Harbor, why didn't you put the fleet out into the Pacific? Why didn't you do this? Why wasn't uh, the radar stations not uh, constantly monitoring and so on? All these different questions we can't those questions we can't ask anymore because these people are gone. And of course, a lot of the, at least with the JFK, a lot of that testimony was sealed and only recently being released.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm kind of, so maybe we can go one step back. So, what do you actually think happened with JFK? And then all the stuff that's been released, has it actually added to any understanding as to what really happened?
right. Yeah. Lee Harvey Oswald shoots Kennedy from the book depository building. Three shots, one
This
miss,
interview's over. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
three shots, two find their mark. Kennedy ends up, they send him to the hospital. They take him to the hospital. He dies there. He gets sent back to Air Force One. Johnson, who was already there, he was on his way back. They left. That was what happened. That is everything in a nutshell. Everything you need to know. Uh, and what was the question? I just had a
Well,
brief.
it's just a matter since
Yeah.
it didn't get a ton of, probably because there wasn't much to it, but a lot of stuff from, was it the Warren Commission? What exactly from JFK was recently released? Like, what kind of information was out
Yeah.
there? And I'm
Yeah.
sure you've combed it all because you have lots of free time, right?
Oh
But
yeah. I
maybe
have
you've at least reviewed it, right?
I have no life, so I can do all sorts of fun things. And I've been through most of it, and there's nothing in these releases to even uh, remotely has anything remotely to do with Kennedy, Oswald, Ruby, any of these players. Most of this is chatter back and forth from uh, Central and South American offices about somebody doing something, and nothing. For some reason, if it had a link to Cuba, if it had a link to Cuba, it got into this file. There were the photos of Lee Harvey Oswald in Mexico City. The photos, the negatives, all that was part of this release. But there was nothing about very little about Oswald, nothing about Jack Ruby or anything like that. Mostly, it was trying to. It's I would say, I don't know if they were trying to build a background of what was going on in Bolivia, Colombia, I think Venezuela. What else? What else? What else? What other? I remember. Those were the big ones that I remember. And no, there was no Adolf Hitler in those releases.
Wait,
Nothing
Hitler
about it.
killed JFK? That'd been awesome.
That would have been fun.
There's still like, I don't know. There's still rumors that like, oh, he didn't die and he went over to Argentina, and
yeah,
because we did find some Nazis who went to South America. That the assumption that
between Operation Paperclip, the Odessa rat lines, the Vatican did ferret a few Nazis out, but nothing to do with Kennedy. Even though there was a news report that came out saying that there was in the JFK release. But then the fun part of that was I actually looked into it because why would Adolf Hitler even appear in this? I mean, that was right off the bat, and sure enough, the paper those came out of that document that was referred to in the Miami Miami paper, and I think Esquire. There was two magazines. I know what Esquire was one of them. Had the link to the actual CIA document, which ended up if you do that, but then you back up a level, you find out it wasn't part of the JFK. It was part of the a similar release for the Nazi War Crimes Commission. It was like these final documents from that. Not the final documents from JFK, but the final documents from the war crimes investigation in the United States, which somebody sent a photo of a guy sitting with Adolf Hitler. There's no evidence of where that photo was taken from. The only thing that was put on there was that this guy was in Venezuela or Colombia, one of those two. So that story, I mean, that was kind of the driver to get me to start doing the news, a news format of my show, because this has to be. I have to tell people this. There's people that are saying, "Oh yeah, Adolf Hitler was in the JFK documents." No, he wasn't. It wasn't even. There was nothing. There was nothing like that. It's like, come on, people, do your research. One of the big complaints I get is that I don't do enough research. Okay, now I'm gonna. Granted, this is going out on iTunes, or it's going to go out as an audio, right?
Yep.
Okay.
So there's video involved too, so if you're not on YouTube, you're missing out, because you're seeing the inner sanctum. You're actually going to see like one of the aliens from Area 51 if you look really closely. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I'm going to move for the listeners that were nice enough to watch us on video. I'm pointing my camera. That's my library. The book's right up here.
This is where the magic happens, people.
Yeah. These books right here, from here to here, those are all the magic decrypts from 19. It's all the Japanese. It's all the Japanese decrypts that the U.S. had received and decoded. These were all the diplomatic messages, and this is where the winds code. I mean, if you're familiar with the Pearl Harbor, there was this winds that was supposed to, if communications broke down, there would be a clear radio broadcast and a weather report about if war is breaking out between the United States, Russia, or Britain. Those documents are in there. And I mean, I've got the second shelf there is all my Pearl Harbor history. The one below it is all my conspiracy related stuff. I mean, I've got the books. Here's my newspaper. I mean, I've gone to microfilm and got newspaper clippings.
I remember microfilm back in the day.
Yeah.
It was fun to go because I was in college. I got to get to like read newspapers from like the 18th century. It was just fun that that stuff still exists
Yeah,
because now there's just so much. You're drinking from a fire hose, but back in the day, you got like one newspaper a week
yeah.
maybe where you were, and that's kind of cool. Okay, so this is a good question that I didn't put on the list and I didn't prepare for like for, but let's see if what we get out of this. Because I'm a fan, I don't know if you're a fan of alternate history. Basically, alternate history is like a genre of fiction where like one thing changes in history, and it's usually about like the Civil War or World War II. Those are the two most popular, of course. Is there some like real pivot point in history where you think would be fun to do like an alternate history where like things really would have changed? Like, is there, I mean, maybe it's just Pearl Harbor. Like, is there a way that the US actually prevents Pearl Harbor from happening? And does that mess with like the plans? And feel free to go another direction if you want.
Okay. Well, Pearl Harbor definitely would have. Pearl Harbor is a, I would, is a real juncture point in American history. I mean, it's much like the U.S. Civil War, and I would say even the Revolutionary War. If we lost the Revolutionary War, you know, who knows what direction we would be at now. Um, um, Pearl Harbor is a real because it's uh, was a. I mean, it Pearl Harbor in World War II. I mean, I would say even like if Normandy failed, what would have happened? That could be a good that would be a good junction point. The Battle of the Bulge, if the U.S. didn't, U.S. and or the Allies didn't stop the Germans during the Battle of the Bulge, um, I can't really think. Maybe Cuban Missile Crisis if it went south and they decided to the Russians decided to launch the nukes against the United States, what we would have been looking like now. Those would be good junction points because it's um, I would I would argue. I mean, those would be important, important at least for U.S. history or U.S. Actually, it would have because since and it yeah World War II would be a good. It would affect the world. The U.S. Civil War, if something changed and the South won, what would we be? Would we we'd still be dealing with slavery probably to this day, if anything. I'm thinking the Revolutionary War, or if we lost the War of 1812, I don't see that those being as critical because I mean the U.S. was a world power in Pearl Harbor. If Pearl Harbor never happened, we never got into World War II. What the world would look like, that would be a good, So yeah, so I think that's what Pearl Harbor. Why there's some importance to me for that because it's really everything changes. I mean, U.S. went from an industrial power to a nuclear power, and that was over 5 year span, 4 year 5 year span. Um, if if there was the other thing would I would probably alternate history slash apocalyptic or dystopian, probably Cuban Missile Crisis. But then 1984, I thought is really play I like it. I like that because well, for there's a few reasons. There's the conspiracy side that seem to think it's a as a checklist that we should be looking at instead of a work of fiction. But it certainly describes a future world, the future world. A lot of what Orwell put in there was very much Britain and during the Second World War, what they were experiencing. Air Base One, you know, the south of England was literally covered with airfields to support the war effort. Um, uh, so the World War II, I think, is a really good. I mean, if you're going to do a if I was to sit down and do a alternate history, I think I'd really look hard at World War II in general. Maybe pick a few key events, and that's how I would do it.
Yeah, there's so many possibilities. I know Harry Turtledove's done a lot of like alternate history, and he did one where like Japan didn't just attack; they actually like invaded Hawaii, and how that really would affect the U.S. because they wouldn't be able to have that kind of midway point to attack. But yeah, there's a lot of possibilities. And of course, there's another subject that I feel like I have to talk about because I did ask about conspiracies on Facebook and got, not surprisingly, a lot of responses. And of course, one of the main topics was like 9/11. What are some of the, I don't know, can I say what are some of your favorite conspiracies about 9/11? I can say whatever I want. It's my show. But yeah, sure.
Yeah, yeah, go
He's
for it.
smoking a cigarette. He's enjoying this.
Yeah, I'm digging it. I'm digging it because 9/11's full of these. Oh, there's one. Uh, there's a couple people who believe that part of the New York building code that they have to place a nuclear bomb under every building.
Oh, so
To
I shouldn't move to New York. Okay.
yeah, because
What? That's like that's there's so many. There's probably like you could name your favorite because there's so many. But go. You can please continue. That's good.
yeah,
I'm enjoying this.
yeah. There's and that's what brought the buildings down. They set off these nukes to bring the building down.
Nukes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, okay. There's that.
Wow. I've been to like the 9/11 museum. I guess I better get my Geiger counter checked or whatever. Probably gonna have cancer pretty soon.
Yeah. Get your dose meter next time you go. Um, there's stuff like, well, they're still perpetuating this melting steel, and it's like
Oh, the
people,
jet fuel doesn't burn at that level. Would they say something like that?
right, right. They keep pressing that, and I mean, I'm on a couple of groups. 9/11 truthers are crazy, and it's always the same thing. Jet fuel doesn't melt steel. No one's ever said that. Nobody's ever said that these beams were melted by steel or not melted by jet fuel. But metals bend, they expand under heat, they soften. I mean, I've seen plenty of buildings that have come down because of these fires that have, uh, it just happens there was a fuel source nearby that could heat the steel up to 700 degrees, which is right there at jet fuel temperatures. And you see these beams melt or bending in, mostly because there was something heavy on those beams pushing down. And I got to see after fire reports on a couple refineries that had some serious fires, and sure enough, there's steel beams that are bent almost in a U, mostly because there was a heavy, again, a heavy piece of equipment being supported by this steel. The fire underneath was literally softening the metal, and the stuff would fall through. And the what else is some of the other good stuff with the
Well, wasn't at the Pentagon there was talk about there was like a missile instead of it being a plane?
yeah
If I'm at.
yeah, exactly. I was just trying to work that, remember some of that stuff, because there was, of course, the big thing is they don't see aircraft wreckage. All the photos don't show airplane wreckage, even though, again, you could do a Google search and find airplane wreckage 9/11 Pentagon. You can, but they say I don't do enough research. I've done it. I've already looked at it. There's wreckage all over the place. So we got airplane wreckage all over the place. Now, when you take a steel, or well, it's an aluminum tube, but when you have it moving 500 knots, coming down, you hit it into the side of a brick wall, it's going to punch through. I mean, the plane ain't going to look too good, but it's going to punch through. And of course, according to the 9/11 experts, that's not supposed to happen because it's aluminum. Aluminum is soft.
Hmm.
No, have you ever? I mean, if someone took a wad of aluminum foil and threw at you real hard, it's going to hurt. You're going to feel it. You know, it's just aluminum. You know, it's light. It's not supposed to do anything. I've got this funky chair. It seems to want to.
Your chair doesn't bend at this temperature, so I don't know if I can trust your chair. That's a tough one. Yeah, 9/11. Oh my gosh. And 9/11, there's so much, like, compared to JFK, like, there's so much video of everything. It's all out there, but people definitely want to think. I mean, it's another one, like, I mean, it was in a way a genius plan. Like, use our own planes against us. And
Yeah,
then people, like, what was it, Building 7 that came down that was near the Twin Towers, and people thought there's no way about it, had to be set off to go. And it's like, can you look into that for like 10 seconds? I mean, I'm sure if you do a Google search, you can find something that lets you know, oh, this is okay. It doesn't make sense, off the bat, but when you look at it, it's like, okay.
yeah. I mean, the Building 7. I mean, you've got a building that had just fallen down. All this debris coming into the side from above. I mean, if a building held up to that, I'd be impressed. Buildings are not. I mean, buildings are not designed to have buildings fall on top of them. Okay,
Okay,
they're usually
that's a good
designed
point.
that these built.
1 point to you. Okay, what you got?
Yeah, I mean, again, working with that architects, engineering. I'm not a structural engineer, so take it for what it's worth. But I do know that these buildings, they're they are designed to withstand winds, wind loading, ice loading. The Twin Towers were pretty much designed to withstand a lot. But when you take an airplane and you slam it into the side, even though I think it's kind of dubious that they used a 707 as the basis if a 707 hit that building. But I think the assumption is when that airplane hits, it's it's going to hit near the top. These were being hit kind of in the center, but they were in the top, and that the fire suppression system would have kicked in to deal with it. Um, I think there's a lot of assumptions on by the the conspiracy side who think, oh, it was supposed to withstand these airplanes hitting. No, they weren't. These buildings aren't designed to do that. There's other things that have, and many other things failed. The fire suppression system came apart. They put anti-fire stuff on the girders and so on. So if there is a fire in the building, the heat doesn't get to the steel. Again, heat is an important factor here. But when you got an airplane that has just tore through the whole building, and literally those planes went through all the floors, you've got fires that have broke out from fuel, from the seats in the plane, the furniture in the building. I mean, it's quite possible there was like thinners and other stuff, stored in storage areas that could have ignited paint. All sorts of things could start. All these fires that were breaking out, and apparently they believe that the fireproofing broke off a lot of the uh, horizontal steel because it wasn't put on properly. So you that so all your assumptions kind of go out the window when it really happens. And when they found that a lot of the steel didn't have fireproofing on it, or of course, yeah, again, the airplane, the debris and so on, and of course they say that yeah, I find it interesting. The passports uh, of the passports of the hijackers somehow survived the fire. Um, it doesn't have to survive fire; it just got to survive the heat, and that's what's. I mean, if you're keeping your passport in your jacket or you're keeping it inside something, uh, it can survive forever. I mean, you could still be digging around. I mean, I'm sure if they were still digging things up, they could find all sorts of uh, uh, stuff that would survive the fire. It's kind of weird, but hey, it does happen. Um, so, yeah, the idea, that there is, is they how to best put it, but it's like they they want this stuff to this they want this to they need this to be true for their theory to stay alive. And of course, the idea is, the main purpose of 9/11 isn't, just the conspiracy itself, but it's like trying to blame the government. They were trying to blame Bush, and for some reason they want to blame the Bush, Cheney,
Obama, because he was in office. Because I feel like that happens. He gets blamed for everything.
he's getting blamed for everything. So yeah,
It's okay. You're gonna bet. I'm sure we're not too far from Obama actually being like technically erased by this. Well, I don't know. This Congress couldn't pass a damn bill for anything at this point. But yeah,
yeah. But there was Henry Kissinger's skin got mixed into it too, and there's something about uh, um, a Union Oil contract to build a pipeline across Afghanistan, and somehow that was a motivation to have the buildings hit by Muslims.
and us being at war with them for 20 years could really help a pipeline get built.
Right, right. But it's I kind of I've been working on this angle about why conspiracies hang around, or they keep being perpetuated, and it comes down to the ends justifying the means. And I'm seeing that more and more, where you got this conspiracy, the 9/11. You create the false narrative that the government was involved with, uh, bringing down Building 7 and all this, all this stuff, with the idea, and of course the secondary parts about building pipelines across Afghanistan, or to do something with Iran or whatever, and that it what it does is create a political backlash against, or was allegedly, or people believe that it creates a backlash against the Republicans or the Democrats or whatever, so that your party or your guy can get into office. And I think that is really, I'm beginning to believe more and more that this is more the driver of conspiracy theories, not that people are going to believe what they want to believe. And, uh, because we live in with a free press, freedom of speech in this country, we're free to we're free to say whatever we want. Of course, what we tend to forget is that I can say the craziest stuff. I can come up with the craziest conspiracy, but it's up to me to defend that conspiracy and to uh, prove it true. It's not on you to say no, you're wrong, or it's up to me to prove it. And it's people like us who has to challenge these people to say, okay, you believe this, show me the proof. And of course, some of them believe that they have the proof, and it says, well, yeah, I saw it on CNN, or I saw it on Infowars. That's my proof. And that's not proof. That's just another idiot telling you what you want to hear. Um, Give me real proof. Go to the newspapers. Go to 1945 and actually find the information. Go back to go to the books, go to you know go to the library. There's definitely there is some real history in there. Get the information, find out, talk to people, find out find out what really happened. I mean, um, and you know you can prove if you can prove that your your theory is right, then you got something. But if you don't, if you can't, well, then you got to say, okay, I must be wrong. You get that, and that's important to at least I want at least to people believing a particular conspiracy to realize, yeah, it's cool, it's neat, might be plausible, but if you have to present your evidence. You can't just say, um, um, what, what would be, what would be a good one? That there was also a shooter on the grassy knoll. Well, get me the person who was on the grassy knoll that did the shooting. Where are the photos? Where's the evidence? Don't show me a grainy photo of what you think might be a railroad. I think it was a railroad worker and a policeman on the grassy knoll. And they seem to think that these were the shooters from the grassy knoll. Nobody saw anybody like that on the grassy knoll, and there's no evidence of it, but um, except for a grainy photo that somebody takes into um, a word a photo processor and say, well, that kind of looks like the police had, and that kind of looks like a guy with a beard or whatever the thing. And I mean, I was watching this one documentary where they did that, and then they started coloring in they put the policeman in blue, and I think they put the railroad worker in yellow to bring it out from the black and white photo. I mean, you know, I'm sorry, you got this really grainy photo and you're connecting dots. That's all you're doing. I mean, I can come up and mark. I could probably take that thing and create a unicorn out of some of that and be just as valid.
Ooh, the unicorn on the grassy knoll. This has not come up yet. I think we got something here.
I've also done. I've been also involved with this Irreverent Skeptics podcast. I don't know if we're still doing that or not, but we have the big garter snake conspiracy.
It's really big.
It's really big, and there's a lot of proof to support that. Because actually, it's the big garter snake that is causing global warming. Because snakes need warm air to survive, so they're the ones that are convincing the oil industry to keep pumping out CO2. So that's my make believe one.
Okay, so before you prove yourself as being the actual deep state, is there anything I didn't ask you tonight? And then after that, where can people find you online and your show and all that?
Okay, so where am I at in the deep state? Well, I haven't got my shield check yet, so I don't know if I'm still in or not. But if you're wanting to find me, I'm on iTunes. A Skeptic's Guide to Conspiracy. You can go to mikebohler.com, MikeBohler.com. That'll get you to my to the website where you can download or subscribe to the podcast. Even if you do a Google search, you're going to see me pop up on Irreverent Skeptics. I've been on the Unseen podcast. Paul Carr does this open forum science. I've been kind of involved with that. I'm wondering if the Bitch Spot report, that was my attempt at atheism. You may still be able to find that, but mainly my main A Skeptic's Guide to Conspiracy, MikeBohler.com. And yeah, I haven't done this. I'm only on iTunes. I'm trying to avoid Stitcher because I don't think, honestly, I'm very critical. I need to do better. I got to do better in my podcast because you're going to listen to it and you're either going to love it or hate it, and it's probably because of my voice. And I'm trying to improve that, but but I'm very critical of that. So I don't want to force somebody to stream to their phone my podcast. You can download it all you want. I mean, I've got a pretty good following, and I've got I'm getting positive feedback. There's a few that, again, the negative stuff is, oh, you suck. Anyone can do it. Anyone the Google search can do better than you, and it's like, okay,
David Icke can do better.
Yeah,
David Icke, Lizard People, check it out.
Yeah, my man.
My man. Yeah, we could probably do another hour on that, but we just wanted to let people know where they can find you. Show notes will have all the details. So if you want to support this show for some strange, odd, confusing reason, perhaps you know what temperature jet fuel burns steel. Be like Bobby, Hugh, Teody, Marissa. Go to patreon.com/Zachrilege, ZACHRILAGE, and that's after like 2.5 beers. It's Friday night, so yeah, more beers. So follow me on Twitter at Zachrilege, like the Zachrilege Cast page on Facebook. Send all love mail and any guest ideas if you want to Zachrilege.cast@gmail.com. So thank you, Mike, for being on tonight. The truth is out there, everybody. Stay safe. If you need the chat, I am available. If you're an atheist and feel alone, you're not alone. Reach out. Let's chat. Get that human connectedness that keeps people coming back every Sunday. Stay skeptical, and I love all y'all, and good night, and good luck.